If you have a Bible and you like following along with the reading, please turn in it to Exodus chapter 23. This is where we're going to spend our time. I'm certain, just because I know we're all adults here, that everybody in this room has come to a place in their life where they've wanted something to happen, or they've desired to go somewhere, be somewhere, do something with their life perhaps in a way that they came to a place where suddenly they realized that they were disappointed. We all face disappointment in lots of ways. And the trouble with disappointment is not so much that we shouldn't expect it, but there's a problem in disappointment, I think, for believers. And it's because disappointment for a believer is a special kind of disappointment. It's not just the common disappointment of they ran out of shrimp at BMAX or something like that. It's really a much deeper disappointment, because we actually find ourselves saying, I'm praying, I'm trying to live for the Lord, I'm trying to be the best believer I can be, and yet I find myself in this area of disappointment. If you read the Psalms, we're not going to read any today, but if you do, read Psalm 73 sometimes, just for the interest you might have in it. And you will see somebody who has grown very disappointed, not just with life, but with God Himself. Let's take a look at this text in Exodus chapter 23. And I'll begin reading in verse 20. The Lord says, I'm going to send an angel before you to protect you as you journey, to bring you into the place that I have prepared for you. Take heed because of the angel, and obey the angel's voice. Do not rebel against him, for he'll not pardon your transgressions, because my name is in him. But if you diligently do obey him and do all that I command, then I will be an enemy to your enemies. I will be an adversary to your adversaries. My angel will go before you and bring you to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I will destroy them all completely. You must not bow down to their gods. You must not serve them or do according to their practices. Instead, you must completely overthrow them and smash their standing stones to pieces. You must serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman will miscarry in her young, or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror before you, and I will destroy all the people whom you encounter. I will make your enemies turn their backs to you. I will send hornets before you who will drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite in front of you. I will not drive them all out in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the wild animals multiply against you. Little by little, I will drive them out until you become fruitful and then inherit the land. You know, disappointment, I'm going to pass some things along to you that have helped me with it, and I hope they'll help you. But we really need to see things like this from God's perspective, and it's very hard to do that. There's only one way to do that. The only way that a person can see something from God's perspective is to take a Bible and see what God's perspective is. Otherwise, we'd just be guessing at it. God created a universe in a certain way. I was in a correspondence with one of the students in a class that I'm taking right now. And this guy, we have to correspond for part of the grade. And so this guy said, well, God's created a perfect world. I said, I don't think so at all. This world is not perfect. It's not even close to perfect. As a matter of fact, even when God created it before sin entered it, it was very good, but it was not perfect. How do I know that? Because Lucifer fell. What God did was he created angels who were sentient. They think, they have ideas, they're very much conscious as we are. And he made a being that is lesser than God, but has the capacity to choose. And the angels chose. So it's not a perfect universe. It's not a perfect cosmos. If you took God and said, okay, he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he could make a universe that was perfect, and one day he will. But it's going to be, as you see in the Bible, a new heavens and a new earth. The one that exists now cannot be perfected. It has to be remade. That's why the Bible talks about a new heaven and a new earth. The old has passed away. It's gone. So let's just say that, take God in his attributes, for instance. One of the attributes of God is this. You may not be familiar with this term, but I'll explain it. It's called ase. Ase means that God exists just because he exists. He doesn't need anything at all. He doesn't need the angels. He doesn't need the cosmos. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need anything. He simply is. Now that's the biblical understanding of God, that he is needless. He has no needs. He could have set up a universe that was perfected. He could. But in order to do that, we would have to be something other than what we are. My friends, well, not my friends, my son's friends, how about that? I made a sandbox for him. It's an octagon about 10 feet around. And I filled it up with dirt. I had Fulford bring me a dump truck load of dirt. I put dirt in it. And it was a place so that they could dig. I wanted them to have a dirt box where they could dig. And what they did was I took my son and his little friend out one day. We went to, I forget, Walmart or somewhere. And I bought for each of them a bag of army men. Little plastic army men. You've seen them. And in there would be a couple of trucks and a couple of cannons and a couple of tanks and stuff like that. And they would get out there in that sandbox and they would set up forts. They'd set up my fort, here's the enemy, you're the enemy, that fort. Everything that happened, they were in complete control of it. It was always exactly as they wanted it to be. The army men didn't have anything to say about where they were put or any of that. God could have done that with us. He could have set up a universe where people were just made to live in a perfect environment where everything was set forth to them, no choices to make, no difficulties to face, no disappointments. He could have done that, but he didn't. He set us up in such a way that we actually have what's known in philosophy as causal agency. What does that mean? It's a big fancy way of saying we can pick and choose, and there are consequences to those choices. You see, God, in a sense, unlike my son and his friend with their army men, he has to pull back a little bit. C.S. Lewis says it this way: perhaps we don't realize the problem, or so to call it a problem, of enabling finite free wills, that's you and me and the angels, to coexist with omnipotence. It seems that at every moment God has engaged a kind of divine abdication. That is, he has pulled back from the creation. If he didn't, we would simply be overwhelmed. There'd be no choice about it. There's God. What's to argue with? You know, there was a time when it was kind of like that in the garden, and even then, we still chose and made a bad choice. So God, not only has he pulled back and given us the freedom, but he's also a little bit hidden. And that is part of the reason that we find things disappointing. You and I don't know how it is for you. I mean, I have a conscious awareness that God is with me, but there are lots of times during the day when I'm engaged in things where I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about other things. That's because God is not in front of me all the time. This is one of the great complaints of people who don't believe. I don't detect God. Science doesn't detect God. So where is he? Well, he has chosen to set himself forth to us in a way that we actually have to pursue him a little bit. You and I have to want God. So that means we're going to have to reach out to God. We have to choose to do that. He's not going to overcome that choice for us. So imagine this. Imagine for just a minute. And I think some people would like this. I do. I can see some advantages to it. Imagine a universe wherein every time we do something wrong, there's a little electric shock, just painful enough to remind us that we've done something we ought not to do, like an electric fence, but not quite so painful. And then every time we do something right, we get this nice feeling of euphoria inside every time God is pleased with us. Now that sounds like a kind of a neat way to live. It sounds a lot easier. We wouldn't have to think so much. The choices would be very much easier to make. You know, there was a time when it was like that. The Jews came to a place where God had done these incredible miracles to take them out of slavery in Egypt, right? The angel of death passing over, all of the houses where the lamb's blood was on the lintel, the frogs, the flies, everything that God brought, the blood, the Nile turning to blood, all of these incredible miracles. They saw all of this. Then when God let them out, he parted the Red Sea so that they walked on dry land, not mud, and walls of water on either side. They saw all of that, the pillar of fire, the pillar of smoke. They come to Mount Sinai, and you've got thunder and lightning and smoke, and they're afraid to even touch the mountain because they fear what they're seeing. So there's this sense right there where you've got exactly that scenario where if they're living rightly, God is blessing them. If they live wrongly, God punishes them. Just exactly that simple way of thinking about life where we don't have to think quite so much. But then in spite of all that, they still cast a calf out of gold. I love what Aaron says. You know, this just blows my mind. Can you imagine? This is something I never met Aaron. I guess I will one day. But Aaron, here he is, the priest of the people. And Moses comes down off the mountain. God says, "You need to go down, Moses. They're doing stuff down there." So Moses comes down. He's got the tablets, big stone tablets. He's carrying them down. He comes down. He gets to the spot in the place where he can see everything that's going on. And he sees the golden calf, and he sees them dancing and having a party around this golden calf, worshiping the golden calf. So he throws the tablets down and breaks them and comes down and says, "Aaron, what are you doing?" Aaron looks at him and says, "I don't know." He said, we just threw all the gold in the fire and this calf came out. That's what he tells Moses. But the point of it is 40 days was all God asked of them to have faith for 40 days. If you can just wait 40 days, and they couldn't hold out for 40 days, they cast the golden calf. So this idea that it would be a better situation if we had the little electric shock every time we did something wrong, or we got the nice feelings every time we did things that God likes, it doesn't work. It didn't work then, it won't work now. You know, the people in that day, just as an encouragement to all of us, they had a lot more evidence of God working than we ever get. I mean, that's just the truth. They could see God working in the world in ways that we don't get that opportunity. That's why Jesus said, "Blessed are those who've not seen yet believe." And let me just pass something along to you all, and I hope it helps you as much as it helps me. Could it be that God has morally sufficient reasons to not answer prayers the way we would like to have them answered always? Could it be that God has morally sufficient reasons that he would say no to a prayer? Could it be that God has morally sufficient reasons to defy us in our prayers? I'm going to say he does, if he's God. You see, that's the distinction between my perspective and God's perspective. God can see things I can't see. He knows that a decision I might make here today might have an effect 300 years from now in somebody's life I'll never meet. He knows that. I don't know that. There are lots of systems on the earth. Just give you a list of just 2 or 3 here that want God to show up and give us that electric shock and the good feelings. You take Islam. That's exactly what Islam holds, is that here are the rules. You obey these rules, Allah will bless you. The Jehovah's Witnesses, hear the rules. Live like that, and Jehovah will bless you. The Mormons, hear the rules. Do these things, and God will bless. But that's not the God of the Bible. That's just not. Psalm 73, again, I would encourage you to read it. The psalmist is completely disappointed. He's saying, look, God, I'm a good boy. I've been a good boy all my life. And yet these people who are bad are the ones who are fat and happy. And I'm not. I'm suffering. I remember I was doing a class one time in Pennsylvania, and it was college age group. And one of the college agents, a good question, said, well, why can't God just fix it? I said, well, what do you mean by fix it? What are you talking about? This kid said, why can't God just take all the bad out of the world? I said, well, let's think about that a minute. Now, I stole this from Walter Martin. I wish I had made it up because it's so good. But I said, let's think about that just a minute. There was a clock up there, a big clock on the wall, second hand moving around. It was about on the 4, somewhere around there. And I said, when that thing gets around to 12, you're God. I said, you're God. Everybody kind of snickered, college-age kids. Everybody laughs a little bit. I said, no, I'm serious. You're God. And when that hand gets up there to the 12, you just make the decree that everything bad goes away in the world. You fixed it, right? And so finally he said, okay. So we waited for the hand to get up there. Everybody's watching the clock. And this kid says, I decree that everything bad goes away. I said, good job. I said, none of us are here. None of us are here. You can't eliminate the bad like somebody out there robbing somebody and the bad goes away. You've got to eliminate the bad that's happening. You've got to eliminate the potential for it. And I said, that lives in every one of us. So if you're going to make the bad go away in the universe, you're God. You've just eliminated everything that lives beside yourself. There's nothing left but you. You see, God has a goal. And this is what makes the statement I made earlier make sense. That God has morally sufficient reasons to not answer prayers the way we'd like sometimes, to defy us, to say no in prayer to us sometimes. Because God's goal is that the maximum number of people will come to salvation, will freely come to be born again. That might require that no is an answer to my prayer. I don't know somebody 500 miles from here and 300 years in the future how what God says to me in prayer might affect that person coming to know the Lord and being born again. I don't know, but God does. He's able to see the things that I can't see. So when I come to God with a prayer, and I pray about all kinds of stuff, and I sometimes for years, and I don't see it happen. It's not that God's mad at me. It's not that God doesn't love me. It's not that God doesn't want us to have good things. It's that it may be that the answer to that prayer is going to ruin somebody else's chance to become born again down the road. God is hidden a little bit for a very good reason. This was said to me once in a Sunday school class. I love this statement. I wish I had made it up. They said, without somehow destroying me as a human being in the process, how could God reveal himself in a way that leaves no room for me to doubt? I thought about that a long time. Because she said, if there's no room for doubt, there's no room for me. That just makes a ton of sense. So the Jews could see the fire, they could see the smoke, they could hear the thunder, they could see Moses when he would come away from God's presence, his face glowed like he was some kind of space alien or something. They could see all of that, and yet they cast the golden calf. They were disappointed. That's why Paul says to the church in Rome, the just shall live by faith. So, if we find ourselves disappointed with God, could it be that God has to say no to us sometimes in order that the goal of bringing the most people possible to be saved necessitates him saying no to you and me. That makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know where everybody is today, but if I've said anything about which you've got a question, you want to pray with me, I'll stay here as long as it takes. As we close, turn to hymn number 54.